You know, if you've heard Invicta, you've looked at Invictas, you know they're very polarizing watches. I've been around and collecting watches for years and years and years, and I've had friends and I've known people that have owned Invictas, and we've seen them on shopping networks, and frankly, I never thought I'd own one. I actually bought an Invicta years ago for my son, and it was his 13th birthday, and I wanted to get him something that he could beat around. It was an automatic watch. He was really into watches, and I got him an Invicta Pro Diver. Well, fast forward a few years later, and here we are with the Invicta 1953 Pro Diver. And I thought I'd give it a shot. I mean, let's face it, at just a little over $100, this is cheaper than most fashion watches you're gonna find. And it's a pretty spectacular watch for the price. Is it something that I'd wear every single day? No. And frankly, I don't even know if I want to keep this watch, but I thought I'd at least show you what it is and what it looks like. And let's talk a little bit about it. So the 1953, this watch, well, first of all, comes from Invicta. And Invicta is actually a pretty long-standing historic Swiss brand. They've been around since 1837, founded by Raphael Picard, but in the early 1980s, they went bankrupt and it was sold in 1983 to a company, which the company is called Ondix, and they eventually went out of business, but the company was revived by Eyal Lalo, who's been the CEO since then. Now, obviously, Invicta is one of those brands. Like I said, it's really polarizing. You can get a watch that's big and loud, and they do a lot of collaborations with athletes and Star Wars and all sorts of things. And, they've never really interested me. But this particular watch, this watch is pretty cool. Now, it's called 1953 because it was a homage of a Rolex watch that was actually launched in 1953. A lot of people have referenced that it's from the Rolex Turnograph, and there's two references. The 6202, which is the Turnograph. Then there's the 6204. And I think that this is actually the 6204. And the reason why I say that is because the bezel insert that you see here, and it's the 60-minute markers, the hash marks without any pips around the side. That's actually from the 6204. Then also the lollipop hand and the lollipop second hand, and then the stick hands for the hour and minutes, and then the minute tracks. Those are both from the 6202 and the 6204. The 6204, I think at some point they transitioned to the Mercedes hands that Rolex is so well known for. But from what it looks like and from what I could see, it was the earlier models that this particular watch was modeled and homaged after. Now, I'm typically not a guy that's going to be looking for homages. I do like homages though, and because there are just some watches that are unattainable for most of us, right? I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you're just an average person and you like watches, but you like a certain style, there's certain watches that you're not going to be able to get your hands on. And unless you've got 30 grand or maybe a little less, maybe a little bit more, depending on the condition of Rolex 6202, well, you might not be able to find one. So I've picked this up just because I wanted to see it. And because I've actually enjoyed it so much, I wanted you guys to see it too. All right. Now you'll notice this is the PVD version. And I've actually owned several PVD watches. Most recently, I had an Islander from Long Island Watch. And that watch is okay. It was a homage. It was all right. I didn't like the bezel action on it. And we'll look at the bezel action on this particular model here in a second, but I've owned a couple Damascos, which I absolutely love. I'm a military watch fanatic, and I love the rough and tumble Damascos. I had a DA42 and a DA37. I also have had a glycine base 22, and I've actually owned a couple of Seikos that had the ion plating. But one thing I love about a DLC watch is, first of all, I love how they patina after some age. You know, so when you're wearing them and then you have them on your wrist and they wear out the sides here, it's pretty awesome. Kind of like, you'll notice I actually have on my wrist today this is a first generation Seiko Samurai, which I'm gonna do a review on one of these days, because this case size is actually smaller than the new release Samurais, which makes it really wearable and a beautiful watch. And this is a really fun watch to have. But what you'll notice here is there's ion coating here. So it's the crown and the bezel are also in black. And the crown is actually starting to wear because of its age. It's starting to wear a little bit. And because it's starting to wear, that patina is just beautiful. Anyway, you know, when you have a DLC watch, they tend to wear over time and becomes beautiful, I think. And that's also what I love about like the aluminum bezel here. The aluminum bezel insert, excuse me, is it is aluminum, so it will scratch, it will patina, but I'm a fan of that because I love it when watches have character. I do try to take care of my watches the best I can, but I don't mind it if I scratch it. I don't mind it if I dent it. It gives it a story. And usually that scratch or that dent or that ding or the, you know, as it starts to wear, it tells a story about the watch and where it's been, and it makes me love it even more. So let's talk a little bit about the specifications of this watch. It is a 40mm watch. I do have calipers here if we need to take a look at it, but it's a 40mm watch. The lug-to-lug distance is 49mm. Thickness is 13.8, almost 14. Sits a little thick, and I think it's that case back. That case back is a little thicker. The lug width, you know, it's 20mm, so it's very, very, that's a strap monster for a PVD watch. As you can see, I wear it on a NATO, okay? And I'll tell you why here in just a second. You know, it's a 200-meter water resistant screw-down crown, stainless steel construction. The crystal is mineral. And if I decide to keep this longer term, I would switch it out. Just like the Hardlex with the Seiko. This is actually a custom AR sapphire crystal, and it just makes the dial pop. I would do the same with this Invicta if I decided to keep it in the future. One of the things I do really enjoy about this watch is there is no crown guards, and that gives it that vintage look and feel. This is a no date watch, and there is a ghost position because it is an NH35, which is the traditional Invicta. I don't really have to spend a whole lot of time on the case back and the rotor, but it's that traditional yellow rotor. You can see it through there that comes on the Invictas, which gives it that, I guess, signature Invicta look, if that's what you're looking for. One of the things I love about this watch versus all the other pro divers, well, many of the pro divers in the line, there's no Invicta riding across the side. And if you've owned an Invicta, or if you've seen them, like the one that I purchased for my son, yeah, that is pretty unsightly for those of us that love to collect watches. Now, one of the things I want to highlight here about the case is the finishing. It's got great brushing. You can see that chamfered edge right there. Great brushing on the side. It's done really well. Now, before I forget, I want to show you, which I've never even removed, is I want to show you the bracelet. The bracelet that actually comes with this watch. Let's see if I can get a zoom in here. This bracelet, I haven't even taken the plastic off. I tend not to wear bracelets too often, and the reason why is because I don't like how they wear. Typically, it depends on the watch, but you know, for the most part, it's going to be on a. I'm going to switch it out for a NATO or maybe even a leather strap. But what you'll notice here, and if you can just take a look at, whoops. If you can take a look at the bracelet, there's little scratches right here, just as I only undid this buckle one time. So I think because these watches are not made in Switzerland, they're Invicta watches, and you know, for $100 and some odd, they're going to be constructed from China. I think that the bracelet and the press clasp and everything else is very cheaply made. But I think the money was really spent in the case and the beautiful gilt dial that you get with the watch. So, you know, I pulled it off the bracelet, and even though I still have it and I tend to keep the bracelets around, I just don't think I'd ever wear it on a bracelet. A lot of times I'll put a watch like this, especially a PVD, I'll match it up with a brown leather strap, and then I'll put a PVD buckle on it, and it actually is a really good look when you have it on. And it's a good winter look, excuse me. One of the other things I love about this particular watch is the dial. The gilt dial is beautiful, and it's got red lettering, which is reminiscent of some of the older vintage Rolex watches as well. You know, one of the other things that you might notice here is the crown is also signed. That's pretty good. You know, there's a lot of micro brands these days. They don't do that. They don't even put on. They don't even sign the crown. Even some of the Seiko Prospex models nowadays, they don't. And I've got plenty of Seikos that I'm going to be doing reviews on because, look, I'm a watch collector. I go through watches I cycle through them pretty quick. There's a few that stay in my collection, but I'm a person that I love to experience watches. I would way rather, instead of having 3 or 6 really nice Swiss timepieces, which I've had, I'd rather be able to, you know, buy and sell more inexpensive watches and be able to feel them and really experience them. That's what being a three-hand hunter is all about, right? I'm sure many of you feel the same way I do. You're not always looking for the greatest and, you know, the latest and greatest micro brand that just came out. You're hunting for those watches that, you know, they catch your eye and you're like, man, I want to try that. I want to see how that fits. And I'll tell you, this is one of those watches that I didn't think it was going to do it for me. But on a whim, because of the price, I thought I'd try it, and I thought I'd share it with you guys. Since I've owned it, and which hasn't been too terribly long, it does run an NH35. And if you think about, you know, just buying an aftermarket NH35 movement, you're talking $25 to $40 depending on where you're buying it from. I know when they buy it in mass, they're going to get a much better price. They're probably paying $10 for a movement, maybe $8 for a movement. But when you're talking about a watch that's $120, $130, it's nice and it's priced right. One thing that I'm not going to do for you right now is I'm not going to show you the lume. But I will tell you that the lume for this particular watch is not, it's not great. It's not Seiko-esque type of lume, of course. Once I get better at editing these videos, I'll do a bit more of a lume discussion on some of these watches. But what you will notice is even though it's not very potent, it does last a while, and it's mostly the hands. The hands will outlast the dial. But, you know, overall, really, really impressive little piece for the price. And let's talk about, like, you know, I've talked a bit about what I like about the watch. And frankly, like I said, it wears great. It wears really comfortable. I have a 7.5-inch wrist. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take off the Seiko. And I'm going to set it to the side here. And I'm going to put on the Pro Diver. And you have to bear with me here as I do this for you guys. One of these days I'm going to do a NATO strap extravaganza because I have so many NATOs in my collection. But the thing about this this particular watch is it wears really well. 7.5-inch wrist, and you can see it's, you know, fits me like a charm. And anything under 50, 51 millimeters lug to lug is going to fit great, despite the as wide as they are. Like I'm a big fan of a lot of the Seiko divers, because they might even be a little bit big for most people, but the way the case is shaped, they tend to fit me really well. But the watch fits great. And you know, if you think about like, what is the downside of having an Invicta Pro Diver? Well, the downside is it's an Invicta, right? You got that social watch stigma about it, where you're wearing the watch and you're afraid that somebody's going to say, oh, what is that, an Invicta? But you know what? If I see somebody that has an Invicta, you know, the first thing that I think of is, hey, at least they're wearing a timepiece. At least they're not wearing an iWatch. And they probably care a little bit about what they're wearing. And it's a conversation starter, especially when you have a piece that looks like this. So, guys, I'm going to say that this watch is fun. It's definitely not in my wheelhouse typically. It's a lot more of an inexpensive piece that I'm going to buy. And like I said, I'm not an Invicta fan at all, but you know, if they keep producing watches that look like this, that wear like this, it could possibly change my mind. And I'm sure they're going to change a lot of other people's minds. Now, this isn't the original 1953 that they came out with. They came out with one that was very limited production, but you can get these, at least at the time I'm filming this, you can get these all day long for a decent price. And I think they probably knew they made a mistake the first time around. So their next batch, they made a bunch of these, and I think they're going to be very readily available. So, you know, if it's something that you want to try and you're not afraid to wear an Invicta watch, I don't think it's a bad choice. Now, before I let you go, I want to say that thank you if you've made it this long and this far, I want to thank you for being here. I am going to become more proficient in editing, and I will be producing videos all the time because this is my passion. I love watches and I love to experience different watches. And that's why I called this channel the Three-Hand Hunter, because I'm constantly hunting for watches. I have a list of watches that are rare that I'm constantly looking for. I have one that's incoming, that's coming from the UK that you just can't find anymore, that hasn't been in production for years. I'm going to show you watches like that in the future. So please, if you've enjoyed this, like the video and subscribe to the channel. But before I let you go, let me ask you this question. I'm going to ask you a question really quick. Have you ever rolled up the sleeve on your wrist to flex the watch that you're wearing? If you've answered yes to that question, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Hey guys, I want to thank you for tuning in, and I appreciate you being here. My name is Blake, and I'll talk to you soon. I am a watchaholic. I'm sure you are too.